married for 20 years. We have 4 wonderful children, which basically means I never get to talk at home. So the fact that I get to do this right now uninterrupted, I jumped on it. It is absolutely wonderful. One of the things I consider myself very blessed is I grew up and had a very tough upbringing. Had a very abusive childhood. Have still the scars on my back from when I was just a typical Tuesday at home and asked my mom for food, and she used my back to put her cigarettes out on. During that time, as I grew up, I read a lot. I'm an only child. So that was everything from the Bible to the Odyssey to every comic book I could get a hold of. Mainly because what I learned at a very young age was that the greatest heroes that went through something, whether it was David slaying Goliath, whether it was Joseph getting sold by his brothers, had a very dark origin. And the darker the origin a hero had, the greater he would shine later on. That's a hope I hung on to very much as a kid when things got really horrible. As a father, and tomorrow being Father's Day, happy Father's Day to all the dads, I do think about the fact that growing up, I was from 5th grade till the end of high school, was first chair flute. My parents never came to a concert. Acted in several shows and plays. Parents never came. Ran high school track and in college. Parents never came to a track meet. A lot of times people, because when you're younger, you hold everything in. So people would always say, "Hey, Corey, you doing all right?" And I would always say, "Nah, I'm good." It was easier to deal with it that way than try to explain what was going on. Fast forward, because I definitely don't want to go through my entire history. 2011, and I have a scar right here. I'm a runner, and I had gone out running, got a little cut. And it was a very warm day like today. And I was telling my wife that I was freezing. Went to the hospital. It was a staph infection. And they said they were putting me on antibiotics for 24 hours. If it didn't work, I was going to lose my leg. And they said, "Okay, we'll see you in the morning." And that was pretty cool. And they said, "Well, do you need anything, Mr. Queen?" And I said, "No, I'm good." I said, "I'm fine." Fast forward 2014, because of spending this lifetime of holding everything in, I had a stress-induced heart attack. One of the weirder moments of it when I was in the ambulance and the paramedic had me hooked up, I really wasn't shocked because I had held everything in. We went to the hospital, the ER nurse looked at it, they took me straight to the cardiac ward. 4 days later, they did the exam to look at my heart. There was no blockage, it's pure stress induced. And they're like, "Are you doing all right?" I said, "Nah, I'm good." And I took that time that I realized, because at this point, our son, who's our youngest, was only 6 months old, is that I needed to take the time for me. I needed to take the time to appreciate all the things I have survived, not get caught up in all the things I've gone through. And that made a big deal to me. I've been an endurance athlete for 14 years, had the blessings of running 8 full marathons, 15 half marathons, an ultra marathon that I have a belt buckle for, and countless other races. If you've ever run a race, and I don't care the distance, there comes a point where you hit the proverbial wall, and it gets tough. And you question every life decision you've ever made, and you've thought about just stopping and going home and realizing this is not worth half a bagel and a stale donut to run all this. And during those times, I try to just do a mental check-in to realize, I know we're tired, I know we're hurt, but what's going on? And I look at myself and go, "No, I'm good. Let's keep going." Now, along that same way, 2019 started that year with what I thought was just a little stinger, had some pain. I think, like, I'm 51, like most of us, we don't really go to the hospital or doctor unless something's fallen off or we can't move. And it got to the point where this thumb had gone numb, my arm was going numb. I finally went to go see the doctor. My C3 through C7 vertebrae were compacted and pushed against my neck. Mind you, during this time, I ran 1 full marathon and 2 half marathons because I kept thinking it was going to get better. And he said to me, "We've got to do the surgery." And I said, that's fine. To be honest, I was in such pain at that point. I told him I'd go get him a butter knife from the cafeteria and we could just knock this out right now. Ended up being Christmas Eve 2019. Had to take all of 2020 off from fitness. And when I say that, it was really nothing more than walking. And that's hard when you're used to getting up at 3 a.m. every day to run and work out. I get to do it at 4 a.m. now because I get to sleep in because it's summertime. But it ended up being that it was a rough year to deal with all of that and listening to the voices in my head as I could hear my parents talk to me and talk down to me. And into that year, I was cleared to finally start working out. I'd obviously gained a little weight. I was very happy to work out. January of 2021, I became a COVID long hauler. I spent the next year in and out of the hospital. I still don't remember the first 6 months of that year because I had 103 fever. Because of that, I have what I call a parting gift is I now have asthma for the rest of my life. So I have like a daily inhaler and an inhaler I carry with me when I go running. Every 90 days, because the COVID migraines were really bad, I get 30 Botox injections in my face and the back of the neck. It is not like any Real Housewives episode. If you're thinking about getting Botox, it is not a good time. I love my neurologist, she's great. And I see the pulmonologist every 6 months as well. And I still have to do that. That was January of 2021. If it wasn't for my wife, I really don't remember the beginning doctor's appointments by telehealth because, again, I had 103 fever. As I started to, I also had 6 months of take-home oxygen. If you ever had to deal with take-home oxygen, I was at 4 liters. Every time I would go to Gould's to change out the cartridge, they would politely remind me that if I needed 5 liters, they would have 5 liters, they would have to vent me again. So that was always a fun every 2-week exchange. And I'd go see my doctors. He's like, "How are you doing?" I said, "No, I'm good." Fast forward to when things started to get a little bit better in September of 2021, I realized that none of my clothes had fit like they used to. I suddenly was wearing quad XLs, discovering that if clothes are bigger, they suddenly cost like $2 or $3 more in a store. And I said to my wife, I was like, I think I need to get bariatric surgery to help take care of this. Met with the doctor, and he said, "You'll be the easiest patient I ever had because you already know this stuff." I said, "I just need help." And so September 29th, had bariatric surgery. I was 290 pounds the day before surgery. And I remember as they're taking me back to the OR room, and the doctor said, he goes, you ready? I said, "Nah, I'm good." And I got some goals to crush. And so then spent the next year sticking everything, losing weight, getting to where I am now, joking with my 10-year-old son that I have better abs than him, but he doesn't think so. And then all that time as I go to my follow-up appointments, and I have one in a couple of weeks, he just says, "How are you feeling going through all this?" Because you got to feel pretty impressed with yourself. I go, "No, I'm good." Go into how I choose to handle difficult times I've been through is that I try not to think about where I've been. I'm also a middle school track and field coach, and just accepted a position at the same school to be the assistant cross-country coach as well, and I started my own running company business because I like to encourage people. I like to remind people how incredible you are and how amazing you are built to overcome difficult things. And I say this because during the hard times, and I'll use the example of running the Kentucky Derby Marathon, the full marathon, remembering your whys of why you keep going when it gets tough. During that race, my wife ran her 3rd half marathon, and our 17-year-old, because she was inspired by my wife last year, joined her and ran her 1st half marathon. So honestly, I never got bothered as exhausted as I was because my whys were sharing the course with me. You have to find your whys. Things are always going to be difficult, and you have to figure out what is it that drives you. And most importantly, find out what it is inside you that drives yourself. Don't just give all of that glory to somebody else. You'll find yourself disappointed. Surround yourself with people that really want to see you succeed. Surround yourself with people that are really going to call you out when you're shortchanging yourself. And sometimes that is probably the most difficult lesson of all. One of the reasons I did choose coaching after getting certified is I love that aha moment. And I'll pick on running as an example, as everybody says, I can't run, I can't do this. I'm like, no, you've just never been taught the proper way. So I love to see that aha moment, especially coming off track season with the kids. all the work we did and seeing them succeed. And we sent so many kids to state this year, and I was so proud of them for that. One of the other things I always try to teach people is that no matter what's going on, no matter what tornado is going on in your life, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Your blessings are there. Sometimes you may have trouble seeing them, but you're exactly where you are supposed to be. When people ask me all the time if I ever just stop and think about the things I've overcome or what's next, and I really just kind of look at them and I'm like, I don't really focus a lot on that. And I've heard this analogy when I was a kid, is I never hear the boos because I don't hear the cheers. So I always try to stay in the moment I'm in. And when I'm going through a hard time, I think of little Corey. And because again, I read a lot of comic books as a kid. And I imagine him when I'm going through a really difficult time, that he's looking at me now. And he's asking if I'm sad or if I'm upset about everything we had to go through to get to this blessed point. And I look at him and I tell him, nah, I am good. Thank you all very much for having me here, and you guys have an absolutely wonderful day.